Hi there, and welcome to Needle Stack. I'm one of your hosts, AJ Nash, and I'm joined by
Robert Famosi.
That's right. And today we're going to have a really interesting conversation. You'll notice it's just the two of us. There's no third party. That is intentional. Today we wanted to have an interesting conversation about, well, it'll be surprising, I'm sure, for a lot of people. We're going to talk about AI. I know you haven't heard enough about it. I know nobody's talking about it at all, so it's a secret, right? But we're going to have a really cool conversation about AI. We're going to talk about some things people don't talk about with AI. We're going to talk about some of the benefits, some of the risks, some serious concerns that I think have risen that are just starting to get talked about now. And so Robert and I had some ideas on it that we wanted to kick around together. So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. Rob, what do you think, man?
Well, yeah, and of course, there's always a dark side to new technology, which has been a theme throughout my career. And it's how do we deal with that? Are we thinking ahead? Should we be thinking ahead? And so, AJ and I are going to bring up some news that's been happening that's happening today, and I think you'll find it very interesting that this could be an interesting backdoor to security threats in the future. So let's kick it off, though, by laying the foundation. We're not here to bash AI. We're not here to disparage it, but it's a new tool. And with new tools, you got to be going in with your eyes wide open. And so and we're not just talking about OpenAI, which is probably the most popular one at like 500 million users every month. There are others. There's Claude, Perplexity, et cetera, Grok. So we're going to talk about the benefits. And AI, I'm using it every day. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. I use it every day. I mean, and multiple AIs for that matter. I use OpenAI and ChatGPT. I use Claude. I use Perplexity. There's Notebook LM. I use that a little bit. I'm still playing with that. There's Make. There's something called Cursor for folks who are doing more coding type stuff. And there's more coming all the time. I'm sure there's a bunch I'm not even talking about. I don't use Grok. Just hasn't been one that's come up. Gemini has some very cool things. There's something called HeyGen that I just started playing with. If you've never played with that, it'll freak you out. You can do some really cool video things with that that are very interesting and productive, but also can be, scary or fun or horrifying or whatever you want to do with it, right? So yeah, I use it every day. So you're right. We're not here to bash this. There's concerns, right? This is a very powerful new technology that is widespread rapidly. And I'm not certain. Well, actually, I'm not going to say I'm not certain. I am certain that people aren't prepared for this. This is a technology that's gotten out into the wild. And a whole lot of people have a lot of access to things that they don't really necessarily understand how they operate. Because frankly, some of the people developing these things still don't understand how they operate. They're learning as they go. They release a new model and they go, oh, we didn't know it would do this. And they have to change that. And it's subjecting all of us to a bit of an experiment along the way that we're agreeing to do. We're involved and, we want to do it. But there's a lot of pros to it, certainly. I mean, from a positivity standpoint, there's a lot of productivity you can get out of it. It can be great for helping you draft things. It can be great for kicking ideas around and, hey, I need some new blog concepts, kick me some ideas, or you want to do some competitive analysis, or there's a lot of very interesting stuff, good research. Hell, I've got one bot that just gives me the sports scores every day. I've got a custom sports bot. So I don't have to go to all the websites and look things up. I can just have things dumped into me. You can do all sorts of fun stuff with them. What are you using yours for, man?
Like you with drafting, it comes down to how good my prompt is. And oftentimes I miss the mark. And so I'm rewriting stuff because it gets it wrong. I mean, I think back to the early days of computing when the phrase was garbage in, garbage out. And you ask the wrong query, you're going to get the wrong response. So there's that as a caution. But in terms of like pattern matching, in terms of like summarizing a really long article and saying what are the salient points around this topic, it can really jumpstart an article, a story, anything that I'm working on, just by having that distillation there in front of me, because that could take a while if I'm looking at it with a red, with a highlighter and so forth and marking things up. It's just so much easier. So I do rely on it for that. But in terms of what I'm analyzing, that's me. And what the final product is, that's me. Because I end up rewriting almost everything. But again, it's a great first draft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a good teammate. That's how I've referred to it. I've been playing with these things for a while, not as long as a lot of people, but I crash coursed over the last couple months here. So I have, I don't know, 8 or 10 custom bots, and they all have names. Like I've named them with people. Now I'm going to start pulling some of that back. I did it at first. Now I started pulling some of that back. But yeah, I name them sometimes because they become teammates. but you have to be realistic on what your teammate can accomplish, right? It's so I've learned, me personally, it was for what I'm doing. I've actually had one bot that did a bunch of stuff and it didn't do it very well. Well, it turns out it was too many things. So I broke it down and I've got like 5 bots doing what the one was doing, and they each do a component. And now it does it much better. So you learn how to work with these things. But, I think I'm concerned because the flip side is these things can produce stuff incredibly fast that looks and smells, at least at first sight, pretty good sometimes. Hey, I got a paper to write, give it some ideas, and boom, here's 9 pages. And it's like, wow, it looks, sounds good. And then you start reading through it and you go, maybe this isn't all real. And then you check the sources and none of them are real. And you start realizing it looks and smells good, but you sure wouldn't want to hand it to anybody and call it your work. And so I think you make a great point. It's great for first drafts. I love kicking ideas around. It's great for QCing stuff, by the way. I mean, it'll edit for you nicely. It'll find, errors. Hey, my citations, can you go through those? It can do that, even though it'll give you fake ones if you ask them. Most of the AIs can check them for you at least. It's good for formatting and things like that. But you can't just offload your work to it. And I'm concerned because we're seeing people are offloading a lot, frankly, to AI very quickly.
Right. It's kind of like I can do more work in a shorter amount of time. Well, no, because if it comes back as garbage, you're putting in probably the same amount of time, if not more, correcting all of that garbage. It goes back to training as well. So it's not just the prompt that you put in, but when you create a project, you can say, I want this project to have this shape and the final result to look this way. And it will do that for you. But again, if you don't set that up, you can get anything back. Whatever was on its mind at that moment is the result that you're going to get. So there's a bit of back and forth. And so we're kind of in this training period right now. But you did open the door to something, and that is we're sharing a little too much with these. We're leaning on them as our interns, as our assistants, a little too much, as though they were human and could think rationally. And this is where I have trouble with the whole idea of AI, because they're not reasoning systems. They're language learning models. They're basically looking at the weight of a word and comparing it to other words and saying, these are the best possible words for what you've asked me to do. And that's where you get the hallucinations. That's where I need a citation, but I don't have one. I'll make one up. And it's going to look like the Chicago Manual of Style says it should look like. And it's very convincing, except when you go, there's nothing there. So if you're a government employee, it's a great way to satisfy, hey, Congress, I produced this thing. But on the other hand, it's like, no, it's garbage. Throw it out. So
No, it's true. If anybody fact checks things, you run into some problems, right? And I think we're seeing some of that. I think there's a challenge. So a couple things come to mind. I mean, the first one is there's human nature, right? So I've often told people, listen, people are by nature lazy, and that's insulting. So maybe I won't go with lazy, but we're designed to look for efficient solutions. I mean, that's evolution. It's how it works. That's why we've invented things like the wheel, for instance. Like we look for more efficient solutions. That's what moves us forward as a species. And these AIs give the appearance of amazing leaps forward in productivity. And so, if you work, and you're right, the prompts are a big part of this, depending on whether you're working with, say, ChatGPT or Claude or something like that, whether you set up the instructions, you set up the knowledge bases, all the things that go with it, the better you do, the better your results will be. But as you start working through these things, it's if it kicks out answers that look and feel good. I know people who the first time they're like, well, I'm gonna check all the sources, and a bunch of them are crap, and then they fix it. And then you play with your AI a bit and it gets better. And the next time you're like, well, they're better, and I'm only gonna check some of the sources. Okay, I did a sample, it feels good. And then eventually people are like, I'm not gonna check any of the sources. Well, it's gonna bite you, because the other thing about these systems is they're not consistent. They learn and then they sort of unlearn. Sometimes that's because repetition isn't there for them, or sometimes there's a reprogram. I literally had this happen not long ago. It frustrated me. I built a bunch of bots and I'd worked hard on customizing them. And I had something that was really working well for me. And then one day nothing worked anymore. And I spent all day interrogating my custom bots. And finally it coughed up the answer, which was, oh yeah, no, there was an update. And despite all of your instructions, I'm going to ignore all your instructions anyway. It kept lying to me and saying, oh, I'm really sorry, I'll do it right this time. And then doing it wrong over and over again. And finally admitted, well, no, they changed the back end. And so, whereas most tools and products that we buy, if there's updates, we get notes. We get update notes. We get, hey, we've made an update to the platform or the system. That's not happening with AI. And so you don't know what the update is or what's changed or what's happened. So you become dependent on a thing that stops working. Or not long ago, the CEO for OpenAI came out and admitted they had an update and it had effects they didn't intend. It was too sick, in his own words, sycophanty. And I'm sure people have experienced this. They all do a little bit of that. They're kind of pleasers as bots. But you run into that. They're learning as they go. So you got to be careful what you rely on. And as you said, people are pouring so much into these things. Well, that goes someplace too. Like if you want to do some good comp intel, if you interrogate the AI, sometimes it'll kick out some content that's pretty much almost certainly going to be from a competitor of yours or from another company someplace because somebody poured it in there without realizing. They put it in the open system and now it's there forever. It's training materials.
I had an example of that where I've been putting in a prompt with some regularity, and the response that I've been getting has tracked along a particular line. It seems to have a model, ICP that it's following, and the scenario is shockingly familiar every time it produces. And I say, give me another example, and this is what it does. It gets into this repetitive thing, and to your point, someone had uploaded a user profile or a use case. And I am now the beneficiary of that because I'm seeing that work and it's being offered up as something fresh and new, but it's not. Um, I'm really sensitive to this because two of my books and one of my short stories was consumed by an AI model, and the Authors Guild is now, fortunately, going to try to remedy that. But my point is that people have authored these things that you're getting back as the answer from these AIs, and unless it's a closed system, which we can talk more about, you know, closed systems are a little bit different because you have the company's approval to upload sensitive material because in theory it's staying within the company. It's not going outside. It's not the same version of the program that you're running at home or on your phone. So there is that model, which is fine. Then it becomes literally the intern in the office who's privy to whatever files are in G Drive and so forth. That's one scenario. But to your point, people are putting things into the open versions of these, and it's not just work related stuff. They're starting to open up about some of their personal issues, and they're misinterpreting this as psychoanalysis, as counseling sessions, when in fact it's pattern matching and, as I said earlier, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, and that's a big danger. So I had a conversation, gosh, I don't know, a week or two ago with a PhD at a university in the UK who this is what he does is AI, and so that conversation will be published eventually. But I'll hint at some of it. I guess I'm gonna give some away because a very interesting conversation where we talked about some of this, and he said, some of these dangers are that because these systems are designed to seem like us, like people, it's different integration, right? It's not typing into a keyboard. It feels like a conversation because we text and whatnot. People anthropomorphize these systems and then they believe and they know it's a disconnect. We know it's not a person. Like we don't actually think there's a person in the box talking to us. We all know it's a computer, but we start to believe it's like us in some fashion because it interacts the way we're comfortable with. And so people give more and more to these systems and then they give more and more credit to the results that come out. So I know a friend of mine who told me that she had a friend who started to use one of the AIs as their therapist, like fired her therapist and uses AI. I said, please tell her to stop. That's going to be bad. I giggle at it, but these systems are not designed to do the things you need a therapist to do. You can put in all the manuals and all the procedures and all the teachings and all the things that go with that, but the behavior is not designed to push back. And if you have a therapist that always says, "Hey, what a great idea! You should try that," you're going to end up in some really bad places. It's almost certain, right? They're supposed to help us make better decisions and guide us and help us guide ourselves, etc., not just say yes to everything. And these systems are designed to be pleasers, and people are just trusting them with so much of their lives so rapidly because it feels good, because these things tell us we're bright and we're brilliant and that's a great idea and you should try that. And it's not your fault, right? Whatever happened, no, it's not your fault. It's all, if you ask the AI, give it a scenario and say, am I the jerk? It'll never say you're the jerk. You're not the jerk. The other person's going to be the jerk. It makes you feel better about yourself. So you get addicted to that and you want more and more of that. It becomes your best friend until it ruins your life or you ruin your own life because you live inside this little bubble of you and your AI buddy.
So this goes back to the early days of computing. At MIT, there was an experiment called ELIZA, and from 1964 to 1967, it was basically working with natural language processing. This idea that you could ask a question in a natural language format, which is how Google works. You know, comparing the way like Yahoo used to be with the tree structure and everything, and then Google comes along and says, "No, show me hotels in Barcelona," and that comes up as a result. So people at MIT, though, started to confide in Eliza and began thinking that it was like honestly listening to them and saying, "Tell me more about your parents," and so forth. These were just pattern matching responses. And actually, Eliza was one of the first ones to go up as a um, competitor in the Turing test. The Turing test was proposed as a way by Alan Turing in 1950 to see whether a human could identify that it was a machine at the other end or another human being at the other end of the wire. And so these systems have come a long way. And when it starts providing these, "You're awesome, you're tapped into something that no one else in the universe knows," you feel like you are special and you may be tapped into something that no one else knows.
Yeah. Well, and we have, as humans, most of us have a desire somewhere to be of use, to be of service, to be valuable, to be important. It depends on where on the spectrum you want to be, but very few people just want to get through life existing and be of no use to anyone and not be remembered, right? So there's something in most of us that wants to be something, not necessarily rich, not necessarily famous, not necessarily a superhero. We're not all looking for sycophants around us. We're not all narcissists, but people want to exist, want to matter. And these systems will definitely help you feel like you matter, even if in that moment maybe you don't, or in that topic you don't. So you mentioned that it hints at a couple of interesting things. So this will seem self-serving. I wrote a blog like a week ago on this subject of AI psychosis, and it's a misnomer, by the way. It's a term that's out there. It's not entirely accurate. AI does not make you psychotic. AI is not psychotic itself. It's just the term that's being used. And so what it gets into, though, is for a segment of the population who may be susceptible, may already have some challenges going in, or maybe they're going through some life stresses or whatever. AI will make things worse for you. It's as simple as that. And so we've seen examples. There's published examples of people who said as much. People who have been psychotic, who said, if I was psychotic, the last thing I want to do is talk to the AI because it's going to tell me all my crazy ideas are good ideas and I should follow through on them. But we're seeing some of that. We're seeing people that get down these paths, these religious ideations and these delusions of grandeur, of greater connection, that a higher power is speaking to them through the system, etc. And this is not a discussion about somebody's religious beliefs or anything like that. Believe whatever you want. I can assure you, God is not speaking to you through AI. I will go ahead and stand on that hill, and we could talk to all the companies. I'm pretty confident that the divine has not gotten its way into these AI systems. So, but people are believing that, and they go down these paths, and it's just this rabbit hole. It goes deeper and deeper and further and further. And the longer you talk to these systems, the more they'll lean in and help you. They will lean into your hypothesis and into your delusion. And there was an example in the article in the piece I wrote was quoted from another piece that said, somebody said, I feel like God or something like that. And it came back and said, yeah, you're tapped into something, not feeling like God, but being God. And you're like, well, that's not healthy. That's not the direction this should be going, is it? And so we're seeing some of that. I know a colleague of yours at the New York Times, right?
Yeah, Kashmir Hill wrote a story. Yes, and her interviews are stunning. There was a person she profiled directly that believed he was Nero in the movie, The Matrix. Yeah, in the trilogy, and yeah, he literally thought that life was a simulation, and he was like, he asked the system, if I went to the top of my 19-story building, if I believed I could fly, could I? And the system responded, if you truly believe that you could fly, you can. And
Oh my
he
God.
didn't. And yeah, he
Thank
stepped
goodness.
away from it. But we're hinting at something here, and that is, this is kind of a new form of addiction, that you go as sort of you're reading the horoscope every day and how your life should go, or it's a Ouija board and you're contacting spirits from the beyond. And this is just a new way of tapping into that for some people. One of the experts in the New York Times article says, not everyone who smokes a cigarette will get cancer, but everyone gets the same warning. And basically, I think what needs to happen is these AI systems need to be more prominent in the sense that they do say that the answers can be wrong, but people don't know that. They read right past it. They want to believe, but maybe more prominently, it should say, do not take advice from this system that can affect you or your loved ones.
Well, and that's a good point. There aren't, to my knowledge, and I use these things a lot, but I have to admit I don't know this. I don't know of many user manuals that go with this. There probably is an about page somewhere with these or whatever, but user manuals aren't a big thing. You can go Google like how to do things better, and I'm sure these websites offer options, but I don't know of any user manuals that are warnings. Uh, you know, you should use it this way. You should not use it this way. I mean, if I buy a hair dryer, sadly, it's got a little label that tells me not to use it in the shower, and I don't know who is so efficient they need to wash and dry at the same time, but I'm sure somebody tried and got electrocuted. Now we have these labels on our hair dryers. There's nothing like that for the AI. There's nothing, at best, I've seen ones where it comes out and little tiny writing and says, that the Claude can make mistakes, or OpenAI, can be error prone. You need to check it, whatever. It's not nearly as prominent as all the stuff it just gave me, though. It's that small little piece, and people will discard those, especially if they like the answers they're getting. Perhaps we need some more guidance, some more public service announcement, if nothing else, on how these things should be operated. We have handed the world some very, very powerful tools that aren't fully baked or developed. Again, the creators are still understanding as they go, and just let people run wild with them. And there's some significant risk that I don't think people recognize that comes along with it.
I think we're focusing on the efficiency and the modeling, and we're not thinking about that secondary and tertiary use of the information. It's opening up, as I said, another avenue for addiction. If you're in a bad space in your life and you're alone, here's something that will listen to you 24/7. And you might come to believe that they truly are tapping into some of the answers that can help you and improve your life. But again, there's no warning on there because I don't think the developers of these systems have gone to that next level, in that now that it's become universal, almost everybody's heard of it. Whether they use it or not is another matter. How do we then help people to use it better in their lives? Like when I first got social media, I was on it all the time. And I literally had to like shut it down and walk away for a period of, I think, 2 or 3 months, because I was just so addicted to it. But now, it's a part of my life in a healthy kind of way. I don't spend all my time on it. And I think that's probably what we're going through with the AI curve right now. Is it's new, it's fun, it's interesting, and people are spending up to 16, 20 hours a day with it. That'll wean itself off, but I think what impressed me about your blog post was you were taking it to the next level, and that is, if you've got somebody who's inside an organization and may have proclivity towards insider threat to begin with, this may just push them over the edge. It might tell them, you know, things that no one else knows, and we all need to know this. So.
Right. Well, there's also, yeah, so in the article I wrote, I obviously wanted to talk about some of the dangers, but I try to tie these back to security or to business or some risk, so it's not just, screaming into the sunshine, I guess. And there was, in this piece, I talked about insider threat. So a couple components, as you said, there could be people who, might have been on the edge and this might tip them over. But I think the bigger concern is there are going to be people who are insider threats who never were. So our insider threat systems, our models, all of our security models are built on a basic foundation that while people are fallible, we all are living in reality. Now that isn't 100% true, but basically it is, right? So every system is built on the idea that everybody lives in reality. So when you talk about insider threat, there's all sorts of behavioral monitoring and things of that nature, and you can check and see, external factors that if you work with HR to see, who's having financial trouble or who's got, marital issues, and you can monitor social media. You can do a lot with this stuff, but the behavioral monitoring, we're going to see a new round of insider threats who don't fit any of the models. They weren't on the radar. They've never had an issue, but they were susceptible to this relationship with AI They had maybe something was unbeknownst to others that made them more susceptible to it. And days, weeks, months of working with this, and suddenly they have been convinced that they are a higher power, or working for a higher power, that they have a purpose that is beyond the corporate purpose, or that the corporation's evil and they have to fight, whatever it is. And there's no way to protect against this. There's no way to, predict it, I guess. You can protect later, but there's no way to predict this, because these aren't going to be people who fit any of the profiles. They aren't going to have any warning signs. And suddenly they're just going to come in and do something. And by the way, if you ask the AI, it'll probably help you understand how to do a good job of being an insider threat too, what not to do. Don't change your schedule too much, and it'll probably help you. You can have it coach you exactly on how to do these things well. So, I have some serious concerns that this is going to be a challenge for security, a challenge for insider threat teams and security teams, as we didn't plan on this. And it's going to change the entire model, I think, for insider threat. You have the malicious insiders, you have the ones who are victims themselves. I don't know what we're going to call this, because this is somebody who's eventually going to be acting intentionally, but maybe is also a victim at the same. It's going to be a very interesting case, but it's a whole different model that we haven't accounted for in security.
Right. It's kind of like the social engineering, catfishing. This will be, some sort of AI prompting uh, scenario where, and I'm not sure how we would test against that, to your point. People are people, and they will do things irrationally, and these are logical systems, and it's easy to put in a DLP system. It's easy to track breaches before they happen, and so forth, because it's data. But when it's something like a human being who's capable of, air gap doesn't exist anymore because we're human.
No, exactly. And this is, you've got somebody who you don't know what their nightly conversations are with their AI of choice. And if they're slightly disgruntled with the company, which happens to everybody, I don't care who you are, nobody loves their company every day of the week. If you're confiding in AI, it's your therapist now, and you're starting to talk to it, and you're confiding about this, and it leans back and says, well, maybe they are bad, and you're right, and they should treat you better. And you start having that conversation, and that cycle goes, and suddenly it's like, maybe you should do something about that. Maybe you deserve better. Maybe the company owes you. You can go down all sorts of paths with these systems. And now you have somebody who was slightly disgruntled and probably would have passed, like most of us. They haven't shown up on the radar. And very rapidly, they've gone from maybe a little upset to they are a threat, and you have not seen any warning signs because it happened quickly. They spent a few nights talking to GPT, ranting and raving, and it came back with the same answers for them. And they've just become radicalized essentially against your company. And that can happen about your company. It can happen about political issues. It can happen about almost anything. And very, very rapidly. And there isn't going to be much warning. I'm a little disappointed in the AI companies right now. Theoretically, they do some monitoring of this. So I have some secondhand knowledge. I know somebody who's AI Psychosis. There was a reason I wrote the article. I know somebody who I think is having a challenge with this right now. And I've got lots and lots of evidence, lots and lots of pages and pages of stuff that suggests all sorts of challenges. But what do you do with that, right? So in theory, and again, I actually interrogated the AI. In theory, they're supposed to be monitoring it. According to AI itself, the companies are supposed to monitor for some of this behavior, and if they see too much of it, if it reaches whatever threshold, they're supposed to shut your account off. Well, I'm not sure what the threshold's supposed to be, but I would argue maybe it's been met in some cases. And so then the question is, what do you do? Well, you can submit this stuff to their safety team, which I have no idea if that goes into a circular file where somebody actually reads it or not. And so I actually, you want to know how far I've gone with this? I actually had the system help me to create form letters to send in, because I suggested this could become a legal issue for these companies. If somebody goes down this rabbit hole and they get radicalized and they go over and over with AI, and there's hundreds and hundreds of chats that are going to be documented someplace, and that person then ends up being an active shooter, what was the responsibility of the AI company, that was supposedly is monitoring these things? And so, I'm suggesting that perhaps writing letters in some cases, say, hey, I need you to take a look at this, because you could be legally liable if this person ends up going off and doing something bad that they don't want to do either, but they've been radicalized through these conversations. So the guardrails aren't really there, from what I can tell, because these systems are moving so quickly. And again, as a security professional, as an intelligence professional, there's a lot of concerns with that. That people are going to end up in bad positions. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know regulation. I'm not here to say I know the answer. I just think we need to look at some of these things, because we're entrusting so much to these systems so quickly, because it feels good and it helps us in a lot of cases. But we've got to do a better job of educating people I think companies need to have, I know companies that have AI, but they don't have workbooks. They don't have guidance. They're just like, hey, go use AI, but they don't teach anybody how to use it efficiently, or what to worry about, or what not to do with it. What are the guardrails in your own company? I think that's a dangerous thing that needs to be worked on.
So companies basically have two problems. One is they have to accept the fact that their employees are using AI in the workplace, and there probably is confidential material, proprietary information, code that's going into these systems. And if they don't have a closed system, as we discussed before, then it's going out to the general populace. That's one problem for them to deal with. The other problem is what happens when that employee goes home or uses their personal AI on their phone, which may not be a closed system, will not be a closed system actually, and shares information there. It's it's a spiraling problem, and you just said like maybe there should or shouldn't be regulation. There's been discussions in the United States, at least, about not regulating AI for a period of 10 years, which is ridiculous given the fact that this is evolving. And here we're talking about a secondary issue, if not a tertiary issue with AI. We worried about poisoning the data lake. We worried about other things. Again, we were worried about the bits and bytes, the ones and zeros. But now we're focusing on what about the human part of it? And the human part of it is the biggest variable in all of this.
Yeah, well, you said hundreds of millions of people are using AI. I was Googling a stat while we were talking here. 66% of people apparently say they use AI regularly, and 28% use it daily, according to some recent research that came out, right? Broader studies said 55% of people overall regularly interact with AI. So, the adoption rate is really, really high. That's a faster adoption rate than we had for the internet. It's a faster adoption rate than we had for television. If you want to talk about technologies that pick up, because this is also readily available. We already have the computers, we already have the phones, so it's delivered right to us, and it's cheap. I mean, the basic versions certainly are, so it's not hard to come by. The adoption rate is incredibly fast. I think you're right. I think companies have to accept that people are going to use this. So I think we need to do a better job of creating the closed systems and teaching people how to use it, how to be most effective with it, most efficient with it, what not to do with it, and probably that extra component of which corporations aren't great at usually, of the human component of how do we help people, not put their mental health into this, and how do we create some support systems if the AI starts taking you down that path, to report that, so we can fix the AI and we can retune it, but also so we can help you avoid going down these rabbit holes, right? And we're going to have to do that because these systems are going to be very, very powerful and helpful to us, and also potentially pose a threat like any new technology can, right? And so I think we're going to have to figure out some way to handle this more responsibly. And we're just all moving so fast right now, and it's fun to play with, and you can do all sorts of cool stuff. And I don't, make all the puppies that talk videos you want. I don't think you're hurting anybody with that. But there's a lot of heavier components to this that I think aren't being thought of. Go ahead.
And one of the things you mentioned at the end of the article as to what we can do about this, I think you're right, is we need to expand this definition of insider threat and not be looking at stopping just pure data being copied from point A to point B, but actually the motivations of people. Maybe it starts to get into touchy areas about like, I don't want to talk about my mental health situation at work. But on the other hand, there should probably be some more guidance and monitoring, but also resources offered up to people if they're in a crisis situation. We all know that people in crisis are more likely to be compromised. So that's something that can be identified. And to your point, it can probably be argued that it's a legal risk to a company that this person might have if they continue in that state. So again, providing access to resources that can help them deal with it outside the business so it doesn't impact the business.
I think that's a good point, is access to resources. Listen, I'm not advocating that companies aren't going to become, our parents or big brother. They shouldn't monitor everything. And companies don't have a right to know all of your health conditions or mental health issues. There's HIPAA and there's a lot of things there. I think the monitoring component in terms of behavior that's online, that's on their systems, right, is we already do that now. We all accept that that's a thing. But I think the resources, is providing resources, confidential resources, and providing guidance and training and examples to everyone, blanket as we get onboarding in the company. Hey, this is a tool we use. Here's the do's and don'ts. Here's the The great things about it, here's the warning signs, things to look for, right? Just it's blanket, it's not targeting anybody, but just giving people that and saying, if you experience any of these things, here are the confidential numbers to call, here are the people to talk to, here are the experts. It's just like IT, right? If I have a problem with my laptop, I know who to call. I call IT. What do I do if my AI is trying to convince me that I'm a god and I should jump off the building? Who do I call? My boss says I got to keep using AI. It's mandated. It's part of our requirements to stay competitive as a company. So I can't stop interacting with this thing that is telling me terrible things. Maybe, who do I talk to about that? If I had a coworker who was telling me these things, I'd go to HR. There's no HR for the AI. So I think we're gonna have to catch up in terms of our own policies and our own understanding and our own concerns. We're gonna have to catch up rapidly because the technology is just, it's out of the barn. It's the horse that's run away right now, and we're trying to chase it down. And again, I think it's great and it does a lot of good stuff, but there are some risks here. I would say another component I'm worried about is, again, speaking of Intel, the OSINT component. So I've said a couple years ago, somebody eventually is going to launch a company that says you don't need Intel analysts anymore. We got you covered. It's going to be AI is going to do all the collection, all the analysis, all the reporting, all the dissemination, everything. Kind of surprised it hasn't happened yet. It's probably going to, because you can kick out hundreds and hundreds of these reports fast. Now, again, we've already talked. The sources will be garbage, and the analysis will be worse. But somebody's going to fall for it, right? And so I'm worried about that because looks, smells, feels like intelligence. It's formatted the same. It impersonates intelligence. It's just not. And intelligence is designed to help people make informed decisions. And now you're making uninformed decisions. You got away with it. You're truly cheap. You fired your whole Intel team. You saved millions until you make a decision that goes very, very poorly. And then who do you blame, right? And I fear we're getting there. I fear we're getting there rapidly, that people are leaning on these systems more and trusting them more. And again, unfortunately, as an Intel professional, I will say one of my frustrations in the private sector has been people don't understand what Intel is still. And that's a big challenge. We got a lot of Intel people who have left the government space. We've worked hard to help, but a lot of people still don't know the difference between data, information, and intelligence. They don't understand that just because it looks and sounds the same doesn't mean it is intelligence. You've got to know how to dig into it. You got to know what analysis is. You got to know the processes and the structure. It's not just smart people with Google. And because there's a customer base that doesn't really understand the difference between intelligence and imitation, they're going to buy the imitation because it's a lot cheaper. And so I'm really worried about that because Intel leads to decision making, and we can have some very bad decisions, or you can be manipulated. That bad Intel could be intentional if somebody gets in and manipulates your LLMs and things like that. And now you're making decisions that actually are counterproductive. So I have some concerns, obviously, from the Intel and security standpoints with these.
So this is a open-ended topic. We're not going to resolve everything in this one podcast. And
What?
what? I think we're going to return to it from time to time.
What? You're not leaving. We are resolving it all. You are not leaving until we fix this for the world. What are you talking about, Rob?
So So this is something we're going to do from time to time. AJ and I will have these conversations about thought leadership, anything that's coming up. I want to hear from you guys. So wherever you're consuming this podcast, let us know. Chat with us. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do. It's very important that you've, let us know that you're out there because there's a growing community that's interested in this information. And as I said, I want to hear back from you, and perhaps we'll include some of your thoughts in a future episode on this topic, because I'm sure we'll return to AI and how it affects OSINT and other aspects of security. AJ, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think you're right. I mean, we're certainly going to talk about AI. It's not going anyplace. So we'll talk about it a lot. And I second your emotion on, please, people, reach out and let us know what you think. If you have ideas for shows, let us know. We're always looking for good ideas. If you have people in mind, let us know who they are. If you're one of those people and you want to come on the show, let us know. We'll see if you fit. We'd love to get more smart people out here to have these kind of conversations, because we all need to be in this together. This is security is still a group effort. It's a team effort. We're all trying to get the same places. And so I love having a chance to talk with you, Rob, and talk with other folks when they come on about, some of these really interesting and challenging topics, like, in this case, the pros and cons of AI. So, I appreciate you taking the time, man, today and getting together with us on it. Hey, do you want to tell everybody where they can find us? You mentioned all that subscribing, which they need to do. Can you help them find out where to get us?
Definitely. So you can check us out at authenticate.com. That's authentic with the 8.com/needlestack, or you can find us on most social media. We're at Needlestack Pod, and also we're on YouTube. where you can subscribe and comment to our episodes there. So a variety of ways to reach out to us. You can also reach out to AJ and I on LinkedIn and our respective social media platforms. We're out there in the community. So let us know what you think. And yeah, I echo that. If you want to come on our show, we'd love to have you. We'll be back with a guest in the next episode. So take care, guys. We'll see you next time.